Tonight, over a cliff, reaction to the NDP's massive budget deficit. Reprieve, tariffs on Canadian automobiles are delayed. And unjustified, Alberta's premier says Donald Trump has betrayed Canada. Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with the NDP government defending the provincial budget delivered yesterday in the BC legislature. The finance minister saying a record-setting $10.9 billion deficit will help boost what she calls a self-sufficient economy to fight U.S. tariffs. But the MLA for Peace River South says there is almost nothing in the budget to help the Peace region or small business weather the storm.
The NDP government does not understand the economy. They do not understand that you cannot print money and you cannot spend money that you don't have, at least not long term. So they've already overspent. And as you say, we're spending currently 25% of British Columbian tax dollars go to service the debt. We're on the edge. Well, we've already gone over the edge of a financial cliff.
Larry Neufeld says the only positive component in the budget is the small business venture tax credit. It'll be raised from $120,000 to $300,000. There are a number of big capital projects in the budget, including, but once again, no money to replace the Taylor Bridge. As for the deficit, Neufeld says it'll be higher than the $10.9 billion that's estimated. Neufeld says with so much money going just to service the debt, the province will not have the proper resources to properly help British Columbians deal with U.S. tariffs. Well, former BC Finance Minister Mike de Jong has been ousted in his bid to join the Federal Conservative Party. De Jong had been campaigning to clinch the Conservative nomination in the Abbotsford South Langley riding. However, he was recently told by the party his application was denied, and he calls the decision mystifying. De Jong served 8 terms in the BC legislature as a BC Liberal. He had high-profile roles such as Finance Minister and Attorney General. Well, if you were hoping to file your taxes sooner rather than later, you may run into some trouble this year. The Canada Revenue Agency has technically been accepting online tax returns since February the 24th. However, some have had their file early have found they can't click the submit button. Officials say the issue stems from changes to the capital gains tax that were set to take effect. In January, the Department of Finance deferred the tax until 2026. The Canadian Revenue Agency says its teams are still rejigging forms to reflect the necessary changes, with a target date of mid-March for a fix to be in place. Canada's spy agency is sending out a warning tonight. CISA says espionage and foreign influence make the Arctic an attractive strategic and vulnerable destination for foreign adversaries. The Canadian Security Intelligence Agency Service flagged the environmental, critical infrastructure, economic activity, and geopolitics as factors making the region susceptible to foreign threats. The spy agency says resource extraction projects and militarization are ways bad actors could establish a presence in Canada's Arctic. Adding natural resources attract foreign investment, potentially threatening regional interests. A spokesperson for the agency says the Arctic's economic and strategic importance has grown steadily over the last 15 years. And Donald Trump has used fentanyl over and over again to justify his tariffs against Canada, and Canadian officials have been jumping through hoops to demonstrate our commitment in the fight against the deadly opioid. However, little of it may be actually flowing into the United States from our border. Trump has made repeated claims the tariffs he's imposing are in part tied to his concerns about fentanyl coming into the United States. Well, according to the Canadian government, less than a half a pound of fentanyl was seized by U.S. Customs at the northern border in January. That same number is also reflected on the CPB website. And the union representing frontline Mounties is pushing back against Ottawa's plans to shift border security responsibilities away from the RCMP. The National Police Federation says the RCMP is the only agency that is properly trained and equipped to handle border-related criminal investigations and patrol remote areas between official crossings. They want the federal government to scrap plans to expand the duties of Canada's Border Service Agency officers, which would allow them to act between ports of entry. The union's move comes as the federal government responds to pressure from the White House to address security issues at the borders. And more tariff whiplash today. The Trump administration says the auto sector is getting a 1-month reprieve. It all comes after a phone call between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. CTV's Michael Couture has the details.
We know the call lasted 50 minutes and ended in a friendly manner, according to President Trump. It was a conversation between the Prime Minister, Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And it appears there has been progress.
We are going to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through USMCA.
That carve-out was driven by a call Trump had with the heads of Stellantis, GM, and Ford. Other reciprocal tariffs are still scheduled to go into effect on April 2nd. But Ontario's premier doesn't want a reprieve. He wants tariffs removed.
Spoke to the Prime Minister earlier. We're on the same page, 0 tariffs, and we are not going to budge. We aren't going to buckle down. Let's move forward to the USMCA deal or the CUSMA deal or NAFTA, whatever you want to call it, and let's start moving forward. But we will not budge, 0 tariffs, and that's it.
Ford believes the pause for the auto sector came from a push by U.S. business leaders.
They're voicing their opinion. They're frustrated. The CEOs, the market tanked. That's what really caught his attention.
In a post on his social media, President Trump said the flow of fentanyl from Canada remains the reason for the tariffs. He added Trudeau told him it's gotten better. But Trump responded, quote, "That's not good enough."
We need to see the Canadians and Mexicans put long-lasting protections in to protect America. Not this, oh, I'm doing a lot of work for the last 3 weeks. Give me a break.
While there is a carve-out for autos, 25% tariffs on all other imports and 10% taxes on energy remain. According to Trump's social media post, the president found it odd that Trudeau wasn't able to tell him when the next federal election would be held. Trump posted that Trudeau was using this issue to stay in power. Still, the Prime Minister's office says both countries will continue to be in contact throughout the day. Michael Couture, CTV News, Ottawa.
And Alberta's premier said today the U.S. tariffs are unjustified and a clear breach of our free trade agreement. Speaking in Medicine Hat, Danielle Smith says this economic attack on our country, combined with Trump's annexation threats, has broken trust and is a betrayal between our nations. Smith has announced a slew of measures in response.
So until our U.S. friends come back to reality, we will focus on efforts and financial means to export one of the largest oil and gas deposits in the world elsewhere. We will look to our own nation's west and east and north coasts. We will partner with industry, provinces, First Nations, and the federal government to build multiple oil and gas pipelines to all of our coasts for the purpose of dramatically increasing Canadian energy sold to Asia and to Europe.
Smith says her government will also assist grocers and retailers with labeling products as Canadians. The province will launch an ad campaign to help Albertans identify where products are from. She says Alberta will enter into a free trade and labor mobility agreement with every other Canadian province, but she says her trump card is that the U.S. needs Alberta oil. However, she adds she won't expand what the United States is currently receiving. And new data today shows more Canadians are scrapping plans to head south amid anger towards U.S. President Donald Trump. Flight Centre says February bookings to American cities dropped by 40% compared to the same time last year. As well, 1 in 5 customers canceled their trips to the United States over the past 3 months. Air Canada is reducing flights to Florida, Las Vegas, and Arizona by 10% this month. WestJet also says there have been shifts in booking from the United States to other sun destinations like Mexico and the Caribbean. Canada's industry minister is trying to block predatory investment behavior in order to protect Canadian businesses amid the trade war with the United States. Francois-Philippe Champagne says Canadian businesses could be at risk from foreign investors looking to take advantage of low business valuations and uncertain economic landscape caused by Trump's tariffs. Champagne says he's updating the Investment Canada Act to make economic security a factor when deciding if a deal can move forward. He says the changes will strike a balance between encouraging foreign investment and safeguarding the country's national interests. Canada has formally requested consultations with the United States at the World Trade Organization. Bilateral talks are the first stage, but if no solution is found within 60 days, Canada could request adjudication by the WTO's dispute settlement body. Ottawa has announced 25% retaliatory tariffs on $30 billion worth of American imports, and there'll be an additional $125 billion worth of tariffs in 21 days if necessary. Meanwhile, Mexico may be contacting Canadian officials about the tariffs that are now impacting both countries. Mexico's president said today if the duties continue, she will reach out to Canada and other nations, and if necessary, her country will look for other trading partners. Claudia Sheinbaum calls the imposition of U.S. tariffs a very definitive moment for Mexico. She is tentatively set to have a phone call with Donald Trump tomorrow. So far, Mexico has not imposed any retaliatory tariffs. It'll announce its response sometime later this week. And Donald Trump capped off a chaotic Tuesday with his first joint address to Congress since returning to the White House.
America is back.
Trump defended freezing funds for government agencies, mass deportations, and rolling back all of former President Joe Biden's executive orders. The president also used his State of the Union address to gloat over the end of the criminal investigations that dodged him after leaving office. And when discussing relations with Ukraine, well, Trump softened his tone on President Volodymyr Zelensky days after their tense exchange in the Oval Office. And the U.S. president suffered a legal setback in one of the first cases to make it to the Supreme Court involving his efforts to shrink government spending. The justices voted 5-4 today to deny Trump's emergency request to avoid paying nearly $2 billion in foreign aid. The money is for work already completed by nonprofit groups and businesses. However, the matter may not be over, as the ruling called for a lower court judge to clarify an order calling for the funding to be released. And word tonight, French President Emmanuel Macron may soon travel back to Washington for peace talks about Ukraine. The trip would include British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Ukrainian President Zelensky. Macron's office says at this point there are no set plans for a Washington trip, but we could find out more when Macron addresses his nation tonight over global uncertainty. The address comes as Europe is scrambling to bolster its backing for Ukraine after the U.S. pulled all military support, and Washington has also now suspended intelligence sharing with Kyiv. All right, please do stay tuned. I'll be right back with weather, but as we head to break, I'll look at today's closing market numbers.